Hi, I'm Amanda Ahrens, and I'm Dow's ESG and EH&S data architect. I've been at Dow for going on 8 years now, and I have a background in math, computer science, and data science, but I got the opportunity to work in manufacturing for a few years at Dow's Digital Operations Center. I also worked in R&D for a time period, as well as corporate IT before. So I really jumped at the chance to get involved in sustainability about a year and a half ago when Dow established this role. So today I'll be talking about supporting reporting and insight with data. Before we get into that, I want to provide some relevant background around Dow in general. So Dow seeks to be the most sustainable material science company in the world, along with the most innovative, customer-centric, and inclusive. And we aren't just trying to be sustainable in our operations, but we aim to provide sustainable solutions to our customers to enable them on their sustainability journeys as well and help them reach their sustainability goals and ultimately create a more sustainable world, right? So we do this with our products and packaging and specialty plastics, industrial intermediates and infrastructure, and performance materials and coatings. We have products that are in the food packaging that you have, the clothing you wear, the shoes you wear, the paint that is in your homes, the buildings that if you go to work in person, which is not as necessary anymore, and mattresses, etc. There's a lot of different applications for what our materials go into to create an end product that consumers purchase. Let me go back. So Dow is a global company. We have 104 manufacturing sites across 31 countries. So naturally, we have a ton of data across all of these different manufacturing sites, and gathering all this data for any purpose would be a pretty large challenge. So that really gets into the challenge that I want to talk about today with, yes, ESG reporting, but also using that data for internal insight and decision making as well. Let me talk a bit more about Dow's sustainability journey to explain the challenge too. Dow has a long history of setting EH&S and sustainability goals and achieving them, and we continue to do that. But actually, when I started at Dow in 2015, I was talking to a sustainability strategy leader, and I had asked, what are the financial impacts of sustainability investment at Dow? And at that time, she said, it's really more of a bottom line impact with cost savings. Well, obviously that has completely changed now. Now with sustainability investment, we see market opportunity so that we can sell our sustainable products to customers, and they're starting to be willing to pay more for products that are low, no carbon, circular, and biocircular, those types of products. Another transformation that's happened along this journey is that the expectations for reporting are different. Before, you were supposed to be doing sustainability and sustainable things, but now you have to prove it, and you're going to be audited, so you have to be able to show all of the data that backs up exactly what you disclosed in your report. So those are a couple of transformations. So going forward to 2030 and beyond, Dow is focused on delivering goals around climate protection, circular economy, and safer materials to deliver products that are safer and more sustainable. I want to talk a little bit more in detail about what has evolved about the reporting needs. Now, the external reporting and the internal usage of data needs are more global. They used to be more regional. So with that, there are a lot of regional solutions that were developed or products that were bought to help regionally. Tons of Excel macros, of course. More frequent, so since we voluntarily release our ESG report every year, we need to validate that data more often, monthly and quarterly. And for internal decision making, it actually needs to happen more like weekly or even hourly. So a lot more frequent needs. More granular. We're not just trying to report the data up and out. We need to store it at a granular level so that we can use it for other purposes, like product carbon footprint calculations. More extensive. This is both from a row perspective in the sense of additional assets that didn't need to report previously, now need to report, and more extensive from the perspective that we actually have to, in the case of emissions, need to speciate. For example, for scope 2 emissions, it's not just CO2 equivalent that we need to provide, but also methane and nitrous oxide. And we may not always have the data from our suppliers that we need to be able to do those calculations at the most granular level. So it's a challenge. More scrutinized. Teams are getting pretty bogged down with jumping from audit to audit, and they have a small window of time between those audits to actually respond to what it was found in the audit that they need to correct or improve upon. And more rapidly changing. We know that there's laws coming and the frameworks and standards continue to evolve in this space. So there's a lot going on here, definitely, but this is where my team, Enterprise Architecture, can help. With that, we get into the solution. But first, I mentioned enterprise architecture, and I don't want to assume that everybody knows what that is. So I asked ChatGPT what enterprise architecture was and to give me an analogy, and I didn't like it, so I made my own. So really, enterprise architecture is like city planning for IT. Buildings have standards, and technology platforms also need to have standards that enterprise architecture will help to create by working with SMEs, of course. Cars traverse city roads optimally and securely. Similarly, data should be able to move between systems optimally and securely without a ton of Excel file extracts. Effective cities are organized, scalable, and sustainable, and so too should effective IT tools be. And city planning, their cities are equipped for disruption like hurricanes and flooding, which we're prone to in Houston. And enterprise architecture equips companies for change like digitalization and manufacturing 4.0, which everybody is certainly familiar with at this conference, but also ESG and sustainability and the new requirements that we have in these spaces. And that's via business process, system, data, and technology architecture. So if you aren't working with enterprise architecture on this challenge yet, definitely involve your organization's EA. All right, so I heard through a lot of discussion at the conference that sometimes it's hard to figure out where to even start with sustainability reporting. And so this is where I start. I pick a sub area that I need to focus on, and for illustrative purposes and the fact that I think it would resonate with pretty much everybody at this conference, I chose scope 2 emissions, and this is for utilities specifically. So scope 2 emissions, as a reminder, is the emissions from purchased utilities and steam. So what I do, and on the slide, I'm on the right, and then the SMEs for scope 2 are on the left. So I'm beginning with some existing documentation and interviews with them. So they give me the existing documentation that they have. That's like their work process documentation, maybe some data extracts and all of that. I review it very thoroughly, start to draw up some things, but I have a lot of follow-up questions. So I only show 3, but this is actually months. Where is the renewable energy data stored? Is it in an actual system, or is this an Excel spreadsheet system of record? How are the emissions validated before upload to the reporting repository? What does your process look like for that? What renewable energy data is included in the reporting repository? Can you give me some specific data entities and data fields? And after all of that back and forth, or the initial shot of I have so many follow-up questions, it's like we come to the conclusion, hey, we actually really need to work together to get the current state, process, system, and data architecture defined. And once we do that, then we can define the requirements and the capabilities that are needed to deliver the future architecture. So when I say current state architecture, here's an example of what that might look like. And this is using the same Scope 2 utilities example. This is a fairly extracted subset of the DAO process because, external release is challenging. So if we focus on the systems lane first, what we really want to put here are any of the actual systems, but also any of the other tools that might be used. So yes, Excel is part of that. And all of the systems or tools are connected by black lines to illustrate the data flow from end to end. So this process starts with the data collected at the meters, and these are our utility provider meters at our site fence lines. And that goes all the way through to the right side where it's included in the ESG report, which starts out as a Word document. Then we have the process notes, which really illustrate things like when something might happen. So a utility company provides our invoices 2 months after the service period ended. And also where or how something might happen. So we use our reporting repository to deal with our renewable energy credits and subtracting them out from the total emissions that we've calculated thus far in the year. So that way we can actually get to our total electricity CO2 equivalent. And then lastly is the data, and that's drawn to those black lines to illustrate what's actually flowing between the different systems, and also illustrates exactly what may have been done to that data. Was it calculated? Was it replicated? Was it aggregated? And give some detail around the data entities or the data fields. So once we have all of this together, it's really easy to start building those requirements because just looking at this, there's a manual uploader file, and ideally we would have our systems integrated. So that can be a requirement to have our systems truly integrated going forward. Once you understand your requirements and capabilities that need to be delivered with the future architecture in detail, then of course you can look at the vendors. And there's a lot of opportunity in the ESG space, so with that comes a lot of vendors, which is nice because these are difficult problems. A lot of the vendors, at least at first, because I've been in the role for about a year and a half, I think they were trying to figure out what their product offering should be too. So it was kind of difficult to exactly map where the vendors actually do play and what they solve and what their strategy is going forward. That's started to become a little bit more clear. So I recommend starting out with mapping out within your sub area, this is still focused on Scope 2, where in your process, high-level process, are the vendors actually going to help solve? Because then you know that you're comparing vendors apples to apples and not apples to oranges. This also helps you figure out how you can actually deliver an end-to-end architecture. So for example, if I wanted to use product 2 and product 6 together, then I would need to figure out how that data was going to flow seamlessly between those two products. Maybe I need a different product that will help me do that. Maybe I need to do some custom development. Maybe there's out-of-box capability. But either way, it's going to have to be included in the POCs that I do to understand what my new end-to-end architecture could look like. So once you understand where the vendors even play, then you can actually compare them in a requirements matrix. So here, product 1, 2, and 3 are fairly similar. So I have mapped them to some high-level requirements. And from the heat map, you can see maybe product 2 is something that I would want to go forward with actually doing a POC with. I think it's also important to note that even the initial product is going to need to ingest data from a data hub, most likely, because you have to have some starting point with your data if it's not the source. So speaking of that, I want to talk a little bit about getting your data together. We've heard other talks today about the importance of this, and it's obviously not just important for ESG, but it is very critical to ESG because the same data is used over and over again for different ESG use cases. So yes, of course, there's the ESG reporting, but you also need to provide data out to ratings agencies, and you need to use it internally to calculate your product carbon footprints. So it just makes a lot of sense if you invest the time and develop a strategy around getting your data together internally. There are certainly vendors that are willing to help you, but what we found kind of ends up happening is that they're on a timeline, and so you end up just extracting a bunch of data from sources and using Excel files, and then you really didn't get anywhere because you were only focused on that one use case. So invest the time in getting that data foundation together. So this is how we're doing it at Dow. All of the myriad of data sources are coming together in our data hub, which is functionally managed and secure. And this contains a lot more than just the ESG data. So I represent that with little green boxes as a subset of the functionally managed areas of the data hub. And here's a little graphic to illustrate that does comprise the ESG data hub, but it really is just a subset. But the data within that hub is informed by the frameworks and standards because you need to be able to calculate it according to the emissions factors that you're supposed to be using. And then you can use it to inform all of those different ESG use cases. And there is a double-sided arrow here because you want the results of those ESG use cases to go back into your data hub, both for use for future ESG use cases, but also for other functional use cases. So those use cases include, like, of course, reporting, product carbon footprint, product certifications like ISCC+, ESG scenario analysis that includes, considering capital projects and all of that so that you have your baseline and can track against your targets and look at what your different options are, executive reports and dashboards, and predictive analytics and AI, which would ultimately be embedded in a lot of these. Going back to the proofs of concepts, once you have identified which ones you want to run, then you can run them, and you would learn which products are going to likely work for you in your company's environment, and that's what we've been doing at Dow. So then we can create the new architectures. So we already talked about the current state, because this is still using the Scope 2 example. But then maybe the new immediate architecture really focuses on integrating the existing system so that you eliminate all of that manual work to create uploader files and stuff like that. And then the next generation architecture really replaces the spreadsheets that you're using as source systems entirely and moves to new systems, like next generations of systems that offer a lot more expansive capability. So my lessons learned so far, having done this procedure multiple times in different sub-areas of ESG, including Scope 1, Scope 2, and working on our reporting repository and having a start on a whole lot of others with Scope 3, water, waste, et cetera. It's important to learn all about the dots that you're trying to connect, talk to those SMEs. A lot of them at Dow at least have been in their jobs for decades. So they're really excited that you want to help make their jobs easier because they do spend a lot of time working with data that's hard to get their hands on and hard to work with, may not be correct. And so then you can help connect and make the larger picture because those SMEs often know a couple steps before them and a couple steps after them, but they just don't have that whole picture. So you can add value right from the beginning by connecting those dots and putting it together in a picture of the current state architecture. Then you can take those requirements from a POC perspective that you're looking to meet and take them to the vendors, and that's going to really help move along the conversation so they know exactly what you're looking for, so that it's not just, I don't know, beginning conversations with vendors were very left me wanting more, I guess, because it was like, hey, we have a bunch of stuff we need to do, and they were like, we offer all these products. So now that we had specific requirements, we could get a lot further in those conversations. There's no data wrangling shortcut. I think I hit that pretty well with the previous slide, but you're not going to get very far with those extracted data sources that you're just using for a one-off POC or something. Like you can't scale that way. You're going to have to create that data foundation. This next one's important. POC failure has to be an option. You have to have a culture that really views killing bad ideas as good as a culture that embraces those good ideas and really runs with them, because if POC failure isn't an option, then you're going to fail at scale, and that will be really detrimental. And then success requires a lot more than architecture, obviously. Sponsorship is key, making sure you have active and visible sponsorship and engaged stakeholders. Data availability and organization, the people and appropriate people resourcing to still run the day-to-day jobs, but also to be able to implement these process changes, because it's not just new systems, it's the actual processes that need to change. And the handoffs between the architecture group, the service teams that are building out the solution, and the end users. And finally, in summary, through going through this procedure to build different architectures, you can build business, process, system, and data architecture that is streamlined, standardized, automated, traceable for audits, secure, scalable, and that delivers external reporting and internal data needs so that you can use it for decision-making, capabilities that are more global, frequent, granular, extensive, reliable, and rapidly updated. And ultimately, this is how Dow is delivering our sustainability goals with data that revolve around climate, circularity, and safer materials. All right, that's it.
When we look at, in the broadest sense, getting ready for sustainability reporting, a big part of the getting ready is freeing up the human resources and having the processes and the data to be able to gain insights that weren't available previously. And part of that is anything that you do as an organization that makes you more efficient and operationally effective. You know, we're adding tasks for our people in our organizations with these new requirements. So what's being freed up for them to be able to address those concerns? So as I said earlier about the win-win idea, you know, a lot of the goals for improving operations, efficiency, those are good things from a bread and butter business point of view, and also can help inform good sustainability reporting capabilities. So where is all that data coming from? How are you making it easier to get that data? How are you using machine learning and artificial intelligence to gain insights that used to take multiples more time, like 10, 100 times more time for the workers to, and decision makers to get and utilize.